Welcome back to my channel. This channel specializes in writing about epic tales and myths from around the world. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to help me out today. We will dive into a story titled Epic Mongolian Myth, The Legend and Conquests of Genghis Khan. Mythic Retelling. Here is the detailed content. Prologue. The whisper of the eternal sky. Before the first empire rose, before the first wall was built, there was only the sky, and beneath it the steppe, endless and pure. The sky watched, the sky waited, and in its silence it dreamed of a man who would awaken its will. In the heart of that boundless land, where the rivers coiled like silver serpents and the winds sang in the tongues of the dead, a storm gathered. From the union of hunger and hope, from the ashes of tribes long forgotten, a child was born beside the Anan River. They named him Temüjin, the blacksmith, forged not by hands, but by hardship itself. The world into which he was born was cruel. Tribes warred without end, brothers betrayed brothers, and the sky itself seemed to turn its face away from man. Temüjin's father was poisoned by rivals, his mother cast out with her children into the cold. The boy grew up among wolves and ghosts, learning to eat roots, to hunt with stones, to read the language of wind and fire. He had nothing, no clan, no shield but his will, no god but the sky above him. One night, beneath a moon pale as bone, Temüjin climbed a lonely hill and raised his hands to the heavens. "Eternal sky," he whispered, "why was I born to nothing? If I am to suffer, let my suffering have purpose. If I am to rise, let it be for all who crawl beneath your shadow." And for the first time, the wind answered him. It came as a breath across the plain, soft but filled with meaning, a voice that was not a voice, saying only one word: rise. From that night on, the boy no longer walked, he marched. He tamed wild horses with his bare hands. He learned the language of tribes, the patterns of the stars, and the secret of the steppe. That unity, not strength, is the true weapon of the chosen. In his eyes burned a light that others feared, the reflection of the sky itself. He gathered brothers, not of blood, but of purpose, hunters, thieves, outcasts, men who had lost everything except the will to survive. They followed him not because he was noble, but because he was inevitable. As the years passed, his name began to move with the wind from the frozen north to the desert south. It rode upon the hooves of horses, upon the lips of warriors, until it became not a name, but a warning. Temüjin comes. Tribes that once spilled each other's blood, from ashes and bone, he forged a nation, and the sky, cold and eternal, smiled. When the tribes were finally won, Temüjin rode to the highest mountain, where the horizon met the clouds, and offered the blood of a white horse to the heavens. He lifted his sword, the blade that gleamed like lightning, and spoke to the world. "O eternal sky, you gave me life in hunger and pain, and I have repaid you with fire and unity. But I am not yet done. My people are but the first breath of your will. The world beyond these mountains still sleeps. I will awaken it in your name." Lightning split the clouds. Thunder answered like the beating of drums. And in that moment, Temüjin became something more than man. He became Genghis Khan, the oceanic ruler, the hand of heaven, the son of the eternal sky. The rivers would change their course for him. The mountains would bow, and kingdoms would crumble like dust before the hooves of his horsemen. Yet beneath all his victories, a single truth remained: that his wars were not born of greed, but of a vision greater than any crown. "The sky is one," he said. "So must mankind be." And so began the greatest saga of men, a storm that swept from the steppes to the seas, from the dawn to the setting sun, leaving behind not ruin but revelation. For Genghis Khan was no mere conqueror. He was the bridge between heaven and earth, the storm through which destiny spoke. And those centuries have passed, and his empire has long turned to dust. The wind still carries his name, whispered in every storm, sung by every river, haunting every horizon. Genghis, son of the eternal sky. Chapter I. The blood of the tribes. The blood of the tribes beneath the boundless blue sky of the Mongol steppes, where the wind howled like wolves and the grass whispered the secrets of the dead. A boy once rose from the ashes of captivity. His name was Temüjin, son of Yasuge, child of the wolf and the doe, destined to bear the fire of the eternal sky, Tengri. From his youth, Temüjin had known only betrayal and hardship. His father was poisoned by rival tribes, his family abandoned to die among the frozen plains. Hunger gnawed at their bones, and despair was the only companion. Yet within the boy's eyes burned a light that no winter could extinguish. A promise whispered to the heavens, "I will unite what is divided. I will bring the tribes under one sky." Years passed, and the boy became a man of iron will. Temüjin began gathering allies from among the broken clans, men tired of endless feuds and raids. He spoke not of wealth or glory, but of order. "We are the sons of the same wind," he said, standing upon the ridge as the steppe storm roared behind him. "Why do we shed our own blood when the world beyond still waits to be conquered?" His words struck deep. Warriors who once fought each other for herds and wives now bent their knees to him, bound by loyalty instead of fear. But among the steppe there was another, Jamuka, once Temujin's blood brother, now rival for destiny. They had sworn an oath together in youth. "Under the eternal sky, we are one soul, two bodies." But ambition is a cruel spirit. Jamuka sought to rule as the Khan of the old ways, through birth, tribe, and the favor of nobles. Temüjin, however, sought something greater, a unity born of merit and loyalty. Their bond, once sacred, shattered like ice beneath the hoofs of war horses. The tribes divided. Temujin's followers bore his white standard of the wolf's head. Jamuka's men carried banners of crimson, drenched in blood and pride. Thus began the war of the two Khans, the first great storm over the steppes. For days, the sky darkened with dust as tens of thousands gathered upon the Anan River plains. The horses snorted steam into the cold air. Drums thundered like the heartbeat of Tengri himself. When dawn broke, Temüjin rode to the front, his gaze unshaken. Beside him, his generals Subutai, Jelm, and Boorku waited for his signal. "Brothers," he said, his voice calm as steel, "the blood we spill today is not for power, but for the future. If I fall, carry my dream to the end of the world." The war cry shattered the stillness. The steppe exploded with thunder as a sea of hooves stormed forward. Arrows darkened the sun. The wind howled through bowstrings and the cries of men. Jamuka's warriors fought fiercely, their courage burning like dry grass. Yet Temujin's discipline was new to the steppes: formation, signal, precision. He commanded with the calm of a mountain, using smoke and sound to direct the tides of battle. When the dust settled, Jamuka's army lay broken. The red banners fell one by one, trampled into the mud. Jamuka fled to the mountains. Temüjin rode among the corpses, his heart heavy. Victory had been earned, but it was soaked in the blood of his own kin. He found Jamuka's banner, torn and tossed by the wind. He whispered, not in triumph, but in sorrow, "Brother, the sky chose one of us, but the sky is cruel." From that day, the tribes bowed before Temüjin. They called him not merely Khan, but Genghis, the oceanic, the universal ruler. The eternal sky had given him its blessing. The wolf's son had become the storm. That night, the steppe was silent. The stars shimmered above, and the fires of 1,000 tents burned below. Temüjin stood alone, watching the horizon, where the moon met the grass. He knew the wars were not over. The tribes were united, but the world beyond waited kingdoms of silk and stone, walls and riches, pride and defiance. He raised his hand toward the heavens. "Tengri, grant me strength, for I will not stop until the earth itself bows." And the wind answered, a long, haunting howl, as if the spirits of the ancestors rode once more across the plains. Chapter 2. The Battle of the Kalka River. The Battle of the Kalka River. The year was 1207. The grass of the steppe shimmered beneath the dawn light like blades of green steel. Across those endless plains, the tribes now marched as one, banners of wolf heads and hawk wings rippling in the wind. The man who had once been a hungry orphan now rode at their head, cloaked in the sky's own color. He was Genghis Khan, lord of the endless horizon, chosen of Tengri, the eternal blue sky. Yet the steppe was never silent for long. Beyond the eastern ridges, a new enemy gathered the armies of the Kalka River, loyal to the Jin dynasty of the south. They scorned the Mongols as wild beasts, calling them grass-eaters without walls. To Genghis, that insult was a promise, for beasts know no fear, and the open plains were their kingdom. When the scouts returned with word of the enemy's movement, Genghis Khan stood upon a hill and gazed into the distance. The horizon was a thin red line, smoke from the burning border villages. His lieutenants, Jelm, Subutai, and Joki, awaited his command. "They come like locusts," said Subutai. "So we shall be the fire that devours the locusts," Genghis replied. "No wall, no river, no emperor shall keep us from our destiny." He lifted his hand to the heavens. Above him, a hawk circled in the wind, a sign from Tengri. The sky watched, silent and eternal, as the storm of men prepared to ride. For 3 days, the Mongol horde moved like a living creature across the land. Their horses drank the dew before sunrise. Their bows sang in the wind. They spoke little. Each warrior knew that the battle to come would shape the fate of all steppes. At dawn on the 4th day, they reached the Kalka River, wide, cold, and deep. On the opposite bank stretched the enemy's army, banners of gold and red, spears glittering like sunlight on ice. They outnumbered the Mongols 3-1, their ranks thick and proud. The Jin general, an arrogant noble, rode forward and shouted across the river, "Return to your deserts, savages. You are no match for the sons of the empire." Genghis Khan's answer was the silence of thunder before the storm. He turned to his captains. "They think we are wind and dust. Then let us show them what the wind can do." At his signal, the drums of the steppe roared to life. The Mongol horsemen surged forward, their hooves striking the earth like rolling thunder. The sky darkened with arrows, a storm of iron rain. The Jin soldiers tried to hold the bridge, but Genghis had planned every heartbeat of this war. Subutai's men feigned retreat, luring the enemy across the river. When the Jin army advanced in triumph, the river became their grave. Hidden beneath the ridges, Genghis unleashed his right flank, the wings of the sky, in a devastating charge. Thousands of horsemen poured down the slopes, encircling the enemy like a closing fist. The water ran red, the cries of men mingling with the howling wind. The Mongols struck from all sides, swift as falcons, merciless as the winter frost. By noon, the Khalkha ran dark with blood. Bodies drifted downstream like fallen leaves. Genghis Khan rode among the chaos, his face expressionless, eyes fixed on the horizon. He did not rejoice, he only whispered to the wind, "This is the beginning." When the last banner of the enemy fell, silence returned to the steppe. Only the crows remained, circling the dead. That night, the warriors of Genghis gathered around the fires. They sang no songs, for victory was sacred, not to be celebrated, but remembered. Genghis stood apart, watching the river's black surface shimmer beneath the stars. Jelm approached and bowed. "My Khan, the tribes are united, the enemies crushed. What remains now?" Genghis looked toward the south, where the mountains met the moonlight. The Jin dynasty still stands behind its walls, but the sky has no walls. Jelm, the world beyond waits, and the eternal sky demands we ride. He raised a handful of river water and let it fall from his fingers. The droplets gleamed like silver blood in the firelight. Every river must flow into the ocean, and I am that ocean. When dawn broke, the Mongols rode again. The wind carried their banners high, and the plains trembled beneath their hooves. The Khalkha River lay silent behind them, a grave for the arrogant. Ahead stretched the endless world, rich, proud, and unprepared for the storm that was coming. Above them, Tengri watched, as he always did, and in the whisper of the wind came a voice that only Genghis heard. "Go forth, son of the sky. The world is yours to claim, but never to keep." Chapter 3: The War Against the Jin Dynasty. The war against the Jin dynasty. The wind from the north howled like an ancient spirit, sweeping across the steppes and carrying with it the scent of smoke and steel. By the year 1211, the tribes of the Mongol plain had become one under the banner of the Blue Wolf. Genghis Khan, son of Tengri, ruler of all beneath the eternal sky, now turned his gaze southward, where the sun rose upon golden cities and walled empires. There lay the Jin dynasty, rich and proud, whose emperors claimed the mandate of heaven. They had called the Mongols barbarians, and for centuries the Great Wall had stood as a wound dividing the world. But now, for the first time, the wind of the steppe carried a single name across that barrier: Genghis Khan. He gathered his generals beneath a night sky thick with stars, Subutai, Jelmjib, and his sons Joki, Shagatai, and Ogadai. The fires flickered across their faces like omens. "The Jin think heaven belongs to them," Genghis said. "But heaven cannot be owned. It is as free as the wind. Tomorrow we ride to tear down their walls and show them whose sky this truly is." The men bowed in silence. Even the horses seemed to listen, their breath rising like smoke offerings to Tengri. The next morning, the steppe shook as 100,000 hooves struck the earth. The march south was endless. The land changed from open plains to forests, then to the yellow deserts of the North China frontier. Ahead rose the Great Wall, a serpent of stone cutting across the horizon. To the Mongols, it was both a challenge and an insult, the arrogance of men who believed they could cage the wind. For days, they camped before it, studying its gates, its patrols, its weakness. Then Genghis spoke to Geb, the arrow, his most cunning general. "The wall is not a barrier," he said. "It is a door. We need only find the key." And they found it, not through brute force, but through shadows and whispers. Genghis forged alliances with the Khitan enemies of the Jin, who knew the hidden passes. Under moonlight, Mongol raiders slipped through the mountains, bypassing the wall entirely. When dawn came, the Jin soldiers awoke to the sight of Mongol banners already rising behind them. The firestorm began. Villages burned like dry grass. The sky turned black with smoke and ash. The Mongols moved like a living storm, swift, ruthless, unrelenting. They spared no city that resisted. Those who surrendered were spared and fed. Those who defied were erased. This was not cruelty for its own sake. It was the law of Genghis. Order from chaos, unity through fear. As the Mongols advanced, panic gripped the empire. The Jin Emperor Xuanzong fled south, leaving his generals to die defending the north. Genghis's forces surrounded the great fortresses of Datong, Taiyuan, and Zhengdu. Each siege was a test of patience and ingenuity. The Mongols, once nomads with no cities, now learned to build siege engines from captured engineers, towers of wood, catapults of fire, and trebuchets that hurled death into the heart of stone. When Zhengdu, the city that would one day be called Beijing, resisted, Genghis surrounded it for months. Famine struck. Walls trembled. The screams of the dying echoed through the night. But still, the emperor did not surrender. Then Genghis ordered the rivers diverted, flooding the outer districts and washing the walls away. "If they hide from heaven behind stone," he said, "then let heaven itself drown them." At last, the gates fell. The Mongols stormed Zhengdu, and the streets ran red beneath the hooves of their horses. Palaces burned, and the great bell towers toppled into fire. From the ashes, Genghis rode through the ruined capital. He looked upon the corpses of nobles and soldiers alike, and spoke to no one. Even victory could not fill the emptiness that grew within him. That night, as the flames consumed the empire's heart, he climbed a ruined wall and looked to the sky. The smoke rose into the stars like prayers. "Tengri," he whispered, "I have broken their walls and humbled their kings, yet my heart is heavy. Is this what you desired, or am I merely your sword, forged to destroy what men build?" The wind gave no answer, only the crackle of fire and the distant cries of the conquered. And in that silence, Genghis understood the path of heaven was not mercy, it was inevitability. When dawn came, the Mongol banners waved over the ruins of Zhengdu. The Jin dynasty was broken, its emperor a fugitive. But as Genghis Khan turned northward, he knew the wars were not done. The world was vast, and beyond these burning walls lay greater realms, the Khwarezm Empire, the lands of Persia, and beyond that, the West. He mounted his horse, armor scorched and blackened by smoke. "The sky is endless," he said, "and so must my conquest be." The army roared in answer, 1,000 voices echoing into eternity. And the eternal blue sky watched, silent as ever, neither blessing nor condemning. For in the heart of Genghis Khan burned both the fury of man and the will of heaven. Chapter 4. The Siege of Zhengdu, Beijing. The Siege of Zhengdu, Beijing, the wind that swept across the northern plains, carried the scent of ash and prophecy. By the spring of 1215, the banners of the Blue Wolf had already devoured the lands of the Jin dynasty. Only one fortress remained, Zhengdu, the golden heart of the empire, a city of 10,000 walls and 1,000,000 souls. It stood proud beneath the same sky, shimmering like a jewel defying heaven itself. Genghis Khan halted upon the ridge overlooking the city. His cloak whipped in the wind. Below, the walls glowed red in the sunset, tall, ancient, proud. He could feel the pulse of the empire behind them, beating in fear and pride. "There it is," he said quietly to Subbatai, "the heart of the dragon. Break it, and the dragon dies." Subbatai bowed. "And if the heart refuses to break, my Khan, then we burn it until even the ashes bow." The siege began beneath the silent gaze of Tengri. Drums thundered. Engines of war rolled across the plain's wooden towers. Catapults built from the bones of fallen forests, and fire barrels filled with oil and rage. The Mongols, once riders of the wind, now learned to fight the cities of stone. Zhongdu's defenders answered with walls of fire and arrows thick as rain. From the battlements came the roar of thousands, desperate and proud. Boiling oil poured from the parapets. Stones the size of oxen crashed into the earth, crushing men and horses alike. But still, the Mongols did not stop. They circled the city like wolves, cutting every road, damming every river, choking the lifeblood of the empire. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The city starved, yet it did not surrender. Inside the walls, famine bloomed like rot. The people tore bark from trees, leather from their boots. Whispers spoke of cannibalism, of mothers burying their children so they might not suffer. Still, the emperor's banners waved above the citadel, bright against the smoke. One night, as winter fell, a messenger escaped through the gates, pale, trembling, bearing a plea for mercy. He knelt before Genghis Khan, his face streaked with soot. "Great Khan," he cried, "the city is dying. Spare the innocent. End this torment." Genghis studied him in silence. His eyes were dark, deep as the steppe night. Then he turned to his generals. "They would have shown no mercy to us. Every stone in that city was laid with the blood of slaves. This is not torment, it is judgment." He dismissed the messenger. The man never reached the gates again. The final assault came with the spring. The snow melted, revealing fields of bones around the walls. Genghis ordered the rivers diverted, the Yongding and the Wenyu, the lifelines of Zhongdu, to flood the lower districts. The water rose, dark and cold, carrying corpses through the streets. The city's screams echoed across the plains. The catapults sang their terrible songs. Flaming boulders arced through the sky, turning night to false daylight. When the outer wall finally cracked, the Mongols surged through like a tide of fire. The defenders fought with the courage of the doomed. But courage is no armor against destiny. By dusk, the gates were ash, and the palaces burned like torches to heaven. Genghis rode through the ruins as the city collapsed around him. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of charred silk. Women wailed. Children clung to the bodies of their fathers. Everywhere he looked, he saw both victory and ruin. He dismounted before the imperial palace, now a skeleton of flame, and walked among the dying. A single old monk, unarmed, approached him. His robe was scorched, his voice calm. "You have conquered the world, Khan," the monk said. "But can you conquer the sorrow in your own heart?" For a moment, Genghis said nothing. Then he looked up at the burning sky. "Sorrow is for the weak. I carry the will of heaven. The sky does not mourn the thunder it sends." The monk bowed his head. "Even thunder fades, my lord. Only silence endures." He turned and walked into the fire. When dawn broke, Zhongdu was gone. Where the golden city had stood, only smoke and ruins remained. The ground was black, the rivers red. Crows circled above, the only ones who sang that morning. Genghis stood alone upon the city's highest wall, now cracked and broken. He raised his hand to the heavens. "Tengri," he said softly, "I have done what you commanded. The proud have fallen, and the world trembles. But tell me, when the last city burns, will the wind still know my name?" The wind whispered through the ashes, carrying no answer. That night, the Mongols left the ruins behind. The fire of Zhengdu burned for days, visible for miles across the plains, a beacon, a warning, a prayer. And as they rode north beneath the cold stars, Genghis Khan looked back once, only once, and in the glow of that dying city, he thought he saw the shape of a dragon rising into the sky, its roar fading into silence. Chapter V. The Battle of Samarkand. The Battle of Samarkand. The sun blazed over the deserts of Khwarezm, white and pitiless as judgment. Beyond the dunes, banners of black and gold rippled in the wind. The banners of the Shah, Samarkand, jewel of the Silk Road, gleamed like a mirage. Its towers of blue mosaic and golden domes glimmered beneath the horizon, a city built not for men, but for gods. From the east came the thunder, a sound older than empire, older than walls. The hooves of 1,000 horses shook the earth. At their head rode Temüjin, Genghis Khan, lord of the eternal sky. Months earlier, he had sent merchants, peaceful men, bearing silks and silver as gifts to the Shah of Khwarezm. But greed and arrogance are enemies of reason. The Shah, fearing spies, ordered the envoys shaved, beaten, and executed. Their heads were sent back to the Mongols. When Genghis heard the news, he said nothing for a long time. Then he stood, his face cold as stone. "He has murdered not men, but peace itself. Let his cities drown in the dust he has sown." And thus began the campaign of wrath. The march west was unlike anything the world had seen. From the steppes to the deserts, the Mongol horde moved as one living storm, swift, silent, merciless. Cities fell before word of their fall could even travel. Otra burned, Butrara bowed. Now only Samarkand stood, proud, rich, ringed by walls thicker than hope. Inside the city, Shah Muhammad II gathered his legions. He had elephants armored in iron, mercenaries from Persia, archers from the mountains. From his balcony, he gazed at the horizon and laughed. "These barbarians think they can conquer civilization. Let them come. We will teach them the weight of stone and gold. But stone cannot stop thunder, and gold cannot bribe the wind." The Mongols approached like ghosts. By night, they vanished into the dunes. By dawn, they reappeared behind the enemy. They split their forces, one under Subutai, and Jeeb feigned retreat, drawing the Shah's army out into the open. The rest circled, cutting off the roads, the rivers, the breath of the city. When the trap closed, the desert itself seemed to roar. Arrows filled the sky like a rain of death. The Shah's elephants charged, but the Mongols opened their ranks, luring them into pits hidden beneath the sand. The ground swallowed them whole. Subutai's cavalry struck from the flanks, silent, precise, divine. The banners of Khwarezm fell one by one. From the walls, the people of Samarkand watched their fate unfold. Flames leaped across the horizon. The desert wind carried the smell of burning flesh. Men screamed prayers to 100 gods, but none answered. Inside his palace, the Shah trembled. His messengers begged him to lead the defense. He refused. That night he fled the city, disguised as a merchant. His crown lay forgotten on the marble floor. When dawn came, the gates of Samarkand opened, not in surrender, but in despair. The Mongols entered in silence, their faces masked by dust and wrath. Genghis Khan rode through the city, his eyes scanning the palaces and mosques, the gardens of marble, and the pools of turquoise water. This was the heart of civilization, and yet he saw weakness in its beauty. He dismounted before the great mosque. The imam knelt before him, trembling. "My lord," the old man said, "why destroy what heaven has blessed?" Genghis looked around at the terrified faces, at the burning domes. "Heaven blessed the step before it blessed your stones. You build towers to touch the sky. I ride beneath it. Tell me, which of us knows heaven better?" The imam bowed his head. The Khan ordered the city spared for one day. Then came the purge. The massacre of Samarkand was remembered in whispers. Thousands were enslaved. Those who resisted were executed upon the city's walls, their bodies left for the wind to claim. Genghis ordered the artisans, scholars, and engineers taken alive, for wisdom was a weapon too. In the midst of the ruin, he found a single boy, barefoot, holding a broken flute. The boy stared at him, unafraid. "Are you the god of death?" the child asked. Genghis paused. "No," he said softly. "I am the messenger of heaven's will." The boy nodded, as if that answer made sense, and began to play his flute. The sound rose thin and trembling through the smoke, a song for the dead and for the living who envied them. When the last fire burned out, Genghis Khan climbed to the roof of the citadel. From there, he saw the desert stretching endless beneath the dawn, the graves of cities, the bones of empires. Subutai approached, kneeling. "The Shah has fled, my Khan. The west lies open before us." Genghis nodded slowly. "Then we ride until the sunset swallows us. Let the world learn that heaven has only one master." The wind rose, and for a moment the sands of Samarkand swirled like a golden sea, reflecting the morning light, as if the earth itself bowed before the will of the eternal sky. Chapter Vi. The Fall of the Shah. The wrath of the eternal sky. The fall of the Shah. The wrath of the eternal sky. The Shah of Khwarezm fled into the mountains like a hunted shadow. Once he had ruled from the Caspian to the Indus, his throne gilded with the spoils of 100 cities. Now his crown was gone, his army dust, his name a curse whispered by the wind. Behind him the empire burned. Bukhara lay in ashes, Samarkand drowned in smoke. Even the rivers ran red, not with life, but with memory. The Shah's white horse stumbled on the rocks. He dismounted, his robes torn, his hands raw from cold. Above him, the mountains loomed like frozen gods, and the stars looked down, silent, indifferent, eternal. He remembered the day he first heard of Genghis Khan. A nomad, they said, a barbarian from the edge of the world. He had laughed then, sipping wine in his golden hall. "Let the dog bark beneath heaven," he had said. "The lion does not fear the wind." But now the wind had teeth, and it hunted him still. From the east came the riders of the storm. The Mongols, tireless, merciless, born of endurance. They crossed rivers where others would drown, and mountains where others would die. Led by Jib the Arrow, the Khan's most relentless general, they pursued the Shah not for glory, but for justice. Justice written in blood, decreed by heaven itself. In the mountain fortress of Ray, the Shah sought refuge. He was no longer a ruler, only a ghost clinging to the memory of power. His guards were few, their loyalty thinner than hunger. The cold gnawed through the stone walls. Each night he dreamed of fire, cities collapsing, women wailing, children swallowed by dust. In his dreams, he saw Genghis Khan riding upon a horse of storm clouds, eyes burning like twin suns. "You defied heaven's messenger," the phantom said. "Now heaven reclaims what was never yours." He would wake screaming, alone. Days turned to weeks. The Shah wandered the corridors of his refuge like a condemned soul. He prayed to Allah, to the saints, to anyone who might listen. But his prayers fell into the same silence that had swallowed his empire. The Mongols drew nearer. Their scouts were everywhere, shapes in the snow, whispers on the wind. The Shah's advisors begged him to flee farther west, to the Caspian Sea, to the lands of the Turks. He nodded, too afraid to refuse. The flight continued across deserts where the sand cut like knives, through villages that turned their backs in fear. Even beggars spat at him. The Lion of Khwarezm was now a fugitive among jackals. At last, he reached an island in the Caspian Sea, bare rock and salt, surrounded by endless gray waters. There, broken and sick, the Shah built a small camp. The wind howled without rest. His servants dwindled, one by one, until only silence remained. He fell ill with fever. Each night he stared into the sky, and the stars seemed to watch him with cold eyes. "Is this my punishment?" he whispered, "to die forgotten, while that barbarian wears my crown?" A voice came from the darkness, not human, but vast, like thunder echoing from the dawn of time. "You mistook pride for destiny," it said. "You built your throne upon arrogance and called it civilization." The Shah trembled. "Who speaks?" "The sky," the voice replied. "The same sky you mocked when you murdered its messengers." Lightning flashed over the sea, illuminating his face, pale, broken, terrified. For the first time in his life, the Shah bowed. Far away, in the plains of the Oxus, Genghis Khan sat in his tent, listening to the wind. Subutai entered, carrying a message. "The Shah is dead, my Khan," he said. Fever claimed him on an island by the sea. The Khan was silent for a long moment. Then he rose and looked eastward, toward the horizon. "So heaven has finished what I began." He turned to his generals. "Remember this, the mightiest empire falls not by the sword, but by the heart that forgets humility. Let this be our warning." The warriors bowed. But in the Khan's eyes, there was no triumph, only the weight of inevitability. That night, as the campfires of the Mongols flickered beneath the endless steppe, the Khan walked alone into the darkness. He looked up at the vast, cold sky, his only true companion. "Eternal blue sky," he murmured, "I have done your will. I have broken kings, scattered nations, and carried your thunder across the earth. But tell me, when the storm ends, what remains of the wind?" The sky gave no answer, only the whisper of the grass and the endless silence of heaven. Far to the west, waves crashed upon the lonely island where the Shah's body lay unburied. No prayer was spoken, no grave was marked. The wind erased his name from the sand, as if he had never been. And somewhere above, the stars shone cold and eternal, watching another empire turn to dust. Chapter 7. The Fire of Nishaper. The fire of Nishaper. The city of Nishaper shimmered in the desert sun. White domes, blue tiles, walls carved with verses of mercy. Once, poets had walked its gardens, and the wind carried the sound of flutes instead of screams. But now the air was heavy with death. The banners of the Mongols surrounded the city, their horses restless, their eyes dark as storm clouds. At their head rode Tekukur, son-in-law of Genghis Khan, a warrior of fierce heart and golden spirit. He had married Kekuchen, the Khan's beloved daughter, a bond of both love and alliance. Where he rode, even enemies praised his mercy. The people of Nishapur had heard of him, and they hoped his heart might be kinder than his master's wrath. Yet fate has no kindness. Within the city, a single arrow waited, fired not by destiny, but by fear. As Tekuka rode near the gate to negotiate surrender, a defender of Nishapur, desperate, trembling, loosed a shot from the walls. The arrow struck true. It pierced his throat. He fell from his horse without a word. The city fell silent. Then the silence broke, and the world itself seemed to shatter. When the news reached Genghis Khan, he did not speak for 3 days. He sat by the fire, his face lit only by the flames, his hands clenched so tightly that his nails drew blood. None dared approach him except his daughter. Kokachin entered the tent, her eyes hollow, her voice trembling. "Father," she whispered, "he is gone. The man you gave me to the world has taken back." The Khan looked at her, and for the first time in his life, his eyes were not made of iron. "The eternal sky tests me," he said softly, "but even heaven should fear the grief of a father." Then his voice hardened. "Nishapur will burn." The command spread like wildfire. Subutai and Tolui, his youngest son, led the assault. The gates of Nishapur were torn from their hinges, its defenders cut down before they could beg for mercy. For every arrow that struck a Mongol, 1,000 arrows answered. For every man who resisted, 10,000 died. The women of the city screamed prayers, calling upon Allah, upon angels, upon the dead, but the sky was deaf. Only the drums of war answered them. By dusk, Nishapur was no longer a city, but a furnace. They say Tolui, mad with grief for his brother-in-law, ordered the heads of every man, woman, and child piled into pyramids. The streets ran with blood, so thick that even the horses refused to walk. The air filled with ash, not gray, but red. When the killing was done, the Mongols set fire to the ruins. The flames reached the sky like the wings of wrath itself. And through that inferno rode Genghis Khan. His armor glowed with the reflection of the fire. The heat bent the air around him, making him seem less a man than a phantom of divine vengeance. He dismounted among the ashes. A wind rose, carrying with it the smell of death and regret. There, in the center of the ruin, he found Kokachin kneeling beside a mound of stones, the place where Tekucha's body had been laid. She looked up at him, her face streaked with soot and tears. "Is this what heaven commands?" she asked. "Or what grief has made of you?" The Khan said nothing. He looked around at the burning city, the crying children, the ruined temples, and for a moment, doubt flickered in his eyes. "Heaven gave me the world," he murmured, "but not peace." She stood, trembling. "Then perhaps the gods you serve are not gods at all." Before he could answer, she turned away, disappearing into the smoke. He never saw her again. When the fires died, only silence remained. Ash covered the earth like snow. The moon rose, pale and distant, reflecting off the bones of the city that once sang of love. That night, Genghis Khan walked alone through the ruins. Each step crunched on what was once life. He stopped where Tekuka had fallen. The arrow that killed him still lay buried in the sand. The Khan picked it up, turning it in his hand. "A single arrow," he whispered, "and the world burns." He lifted his eyes to the heavens. "Eternal sky," he said, forgive me or forget me. I no longer know which I deserve." The wind rose in answer, carrying the scent of smoke and sorrow into the endless dark. From that night onward, the Mongols feared the Khan's silence more than his rage. He no longer spoke of mercy. He no longer spoke of peace. He had become what the world had named him, the scourge of God, and far beyond the horizon. As the ashes of Nishaper drifted on the wind, a new empire trembled, for the storm had not yet passed. Chapter 8. The Crossing of the Mountains. The crossing of the mountains. The wind was sharp as glass. Snow fell like ashes from a sky without mercy. Ahead, the Hindu Kush rose like the bones of the world, mountains so vast they seemed to hold up heaven itself. No army had ever crossed them. But Genghis Khan was not a man who obeyed the word impossible. He stood at the edge of the world, his cloak whipping in the storm, his eyes fixed on the white horizon. Behind him, his warriors waited, 10,000 horsemen, silent and grim. Their breath steamed in the freezing air, their armor rimmed with frost, their hearts bound not by hope, but by command. "The Shah fled beyond these peaks," said Subbatai, his voice muffled by snow. "No army can pass through this." The Khan's gaze did not move. "Then we will not pass as men." He raised his arm toward the mountains. "We ride not for gold, nor for vengeance. We ride because the sky commands. The world must learn there is no land beyond my reach." The army bowed their heads, and the wind answered with a howl that shook the heavens. The ascent began. They rode through valleys of silence and stone, where even the echoes froze. The snow swallowed their tracks as soon as they were made. Night fell quickly, and the moon cast shadows long and thin like ghosts. Men froze in their saddles. Horses stumbled and did not rise again. Still, the army pressed forward. They burned saddles for warmth, ate leather and snow, prayed to spirits that did not answer. Each dawn, the Khan rode ahead, alone. He spoke to no one. Some said he was speaking to Tengri, the eternal sky itself. On the 7th day, the blizzard struck. It came with a roar like a living beast, burying the world in white fury. Tents vanished, men vanished, the horizon vanished. Subbatai shouted above the storm, "We must turn back. Heaven itself forbids our path." But the Khan's voice cut through the wind like iron. Heaven forbids nothing to its messenger. He drove his horse forward into the storm, and one by one his generals followed. For 3 days and 3 nights they rode through a world that no longer had up or down, only endless whiteness and the heartbeat of survival. By the 4th dawn, silence fell. The storm had passed, but so had half the army. Bodies lay buried beneath the snow, their faces peaceful, as if death itself had been too tired to be cruel. Tolui dismounted and looked around. "We cannot go on," he said, voice breaking. "Even the strongest are dying." Genghis looked toward the rising sun, a pale disk behind clouds. "If we stop here, we die forgotten. If we go forward, we die remembered." He pointed toward the pass, a narrow slit between cliffs, where the wind screamed like the souls of the lost. "Forward," he whispered. Through the bones of the earth they entered the pass. The rocks loomed like giants, the wind cut like a blade. Every step was agony. But the Mongols moved as if possessed, driven by something greater than life. At night, fires flickered faintly in the snow. The men huddled close, telling stories of home, of green grass and mothers' songs, of sunlight and horses running free. Some believed that if they could just keep talking, they would not vanish into silence. On the 9th night, a strange thing happened. The snow stopped falling. The sky cleared, revealing stars, cold, vast, eternal. The men lifted their eyes. Some wept. Genghis Khan stood among them, his armor glinting faintly in starlight. He raised his arms to the heavens. "Eternal sky," he called. "You have tested us with fire, with famine, with fear. Now you test us with silence. We are your children. We will not break." A single comet burned across the heavens, white fire on black velvet. The men fell to their knees, believing it a sign. "Heaven rides with us," whispered Sabbatai. At dawn, they reached the summit. Below them stretched a new world, valleys green and wide, rivers winding like silver veins. The Indus lands, the realm of Jalal al-Din, the last heir of the Shah. Genghis Khan gazed down upon it. His beard was crusted with ice, his eyes hollow, yet filled with purpose. "We have crossed the bones of the world," he said. "No man can say there is a border before heaven's will." Then, softly, almost a whisper, "Those who fell, their souls ride with us now." The wind blew down from the peaks, and for a moment it sounded like distant hoofbeats, as if the dead still rode beside them. The army descended, leaving behind a trail of bones and silence. In the passes they named afterward, no grass ever grew again. Only the whisper of the storm remained, telling travelers of the time when men became shadows, and shadows conquered the mountains. Chapter X: The Battle of the Indus. The Battle of the Indus. The river roared like a living god, wide as the sky, deep as eternity. The Indus flowed between mountains like a silver serpent, its waters swollen by melting snow and ancient rage. On one side stood the Mongol horde, dust-blackened, relentless, their banners torn but unyielding. At their center, upon a black horse, rode Genghis Khan, his armor glimmering like storm-cloud steel. On the other bank, a smaller army waited, the last remnant of Khwarezm. At its head stood Jalal al-Din, young, fierce, radiant as a blade newly forged. He was the son of the fallen Shah, and in his veins burned both defeat and defiance. The morning sun rose blood-red, mist curled from the river, and both armies watched each other through the haze of destiny. A Mongol scout rode forward. He raised a horn and shouted, "The Khan commands surrender. No man escapes the sky's decree." Jalal al-Din rode out alone, his white stallion gleaming with dew, his armor adorned with the crescent moon of Khwarezm. He called back across the river, "Tell your Khan, the sky may rule above, but on earth, men still have hearts that do not kneel." The wind carried his words. Genghis Khan heard them, and for the first time in many years, he smiled, not in mockery, but in respect. "A lion's cub," he murmured. "Then let the sky judge, whose roar will echo longer." The horns of war sounded, the ground shook. The Mongol archers released a rain of death. Arrows darkened the sun, singing the song of extinction. But Jalal al-Din's men raised their shields, their spears forming a wall of light. They fought like men who knew they would die, but refused to die quietly. The riverbank became a furnace. Steel clashed with steel. Horses screamed. The dust turned red. Genghis Khan rode through the chaos, silent, terrible, unerring, a god of war carved in flesh. By the fourth dawn, silence fell. The storm had passed, but so had half the army. Bodies lay buried beneath the snow, their faces peaceful, as if death itself had been too tired to be cruel. Tolui dismounted and looked around. "We cannot go on," he said. voice breaking. Even the strongest are dying. Genghis looked toward the rising sun, a pale disk behind clouds. If we stop here, we die forgotten. If we go forward, we die remembered. He pointed toward the pass, a narrow slit between cliffs, where the wind screamed like the souls of the lost. Forward, he whispered. Through the bones of the earth, they entered the pass. The rocks loomed like giants, the wind cut like a blade. Every step was agony, but the Mongols moved as if possessed, driven by something greater than life. At night, fires flickered faintly in the snow. The men huddled close, telling stories of home, of green grass and mothers' songs, of sunlight and horses running free. Some believed that if they could just keep talking, they would not vanish into silence. On the 9th night, a strange thing happened. The snow stopped falling. The sky cleared, revealing stars, cold, vast, eternal. The men lifted their eyes. Some wept. Genghis Khan stood among them, his armor glinting faintly in starlight. He raised his arms to the heavens. Eternal sky, he called. You have tested us with fire, with famine, with fear. Now you test us with silence. We are your children. We will not break. A single comet burned across the heavens, white fire on black velvet. The men fell to their knees, believing it a sign. Heaven rides with us, whispered Sabetai. At dawn, they reached the summit. Below them stretched a new world, valleys green and wide, rivers winding like silver veins. The Indus lands, the realm of Jalal al-Din, the last heir of the Shah. Genghis Khan gazed down upon it. His beard was crusted with ice, his eyes hollow, yet filled with purpose. We have crossed the bones of the world, he said. No man can say there is a border before heaven's will. Then, softly, almost a whisper, those who fell, their souls ride with us now. The wind blew down from the peaks, and for a moment it sounded like distant hoofbeats, as if the dead still rode beside them. The army descended, leaving behind a trail of bones and silence. In the passes they named afterward, no grass ever grew again. Only the whisper of the storm remained, telling travelers of the time when men became shadows, and shadows conquered the mountains. Chapter X, The Return to Karakoram. The return to Karakoram. The wind was colder now. It carried with it the scent of ashes, of distance, and of memories that no longer had names. Across endless plains and frozen rivers, the banners of the Mongols fluttered, weary but unbeaten. The world had been broken and remade under the hooves of Genghis Khan. Empires had fallen, kings had bowed. From the Great Wall of China to the deserts of Persia, his shadow stretched across continents. And yet, as he rode toward Karakoram, the place where his story began, he felt the weight of silence pressing heavier than any crown. The eternal blue sky shone above him, that same vast dome he had worshipped since boyhood, but now it seemed farther away. The voices of the slain whispered through the grass, and the rivers murmured with the ghosts of those who had crossed them and never returned. Genghis dismounted and walked alone. The land was quiet, the bones of war buried beneath snow and time. He remembered the day he had first taken up a bow, the day he had sworn vengeance for his father, the day he had united the tribes under one banner. And now, he thought, all banners fade, all fires die. That night, he sat by a small fire near the Ainen River. No soldiers, no drums, only the rustle of the wind and the soft breath of his horse. Above, the stars burned cold and pure. He spoke to the sky as if to an old friend, Tengri, Eternal One. you gave me the world. I tore it apart and rebuilt it in your name. But what remains of me now? A man, or merely your shadow? The flames crackled. Somewhere far away, a wolf howled, long and mournful. He closed his eyes, and for a moment he saw not cities burning, but children laughing, not warriors, but the sons he had buried along the way. When dawn came, a rider approached. It was Subutai, the Iron Wolf, still scarred from the battles in the west. He dismounted, bowed deeply, and said, "My Khan, the world lies beneath your feet. What command does heaven give us next?" Genghis looked out across the plains. The grass shimmered like waves under the pale sun. "No more conquest," he said quietly. "The sky has no end, but men do." Subutai hesitated. He had never seen his master's eyes so distant. "Then shall we return home, my Khan?" Genghis nodded. "Yes, to the beginning." They rode together to the valley of Karakoram, where the Orkhan River carved its silver path through the earth. The air was filled with the scent of steppe flowers, the same scent that had filled the boy Temüjin's lungs long ago. The people came out to meet him, old warriors, mothers, children, and shamans. They fell to their knees, their songs echoing across the plain. The son of the eternal sky returns. But Genghis raised his hand. "Rise, the sky is the only one to kneel before." He dismounted and walked among them, touching their heads, their shoulders, the calloused hands of herders, the faces of those who had waited. He realized then that power was not in the sword, but in the hearts that still believed. That night, a great feast was held. Firelight danced on bronze cups and shining eyes. Warriors recited songs of conquest, the battle of Zhengdu, the fall of Bukhara, the crossing of the Indus. But Genghis said little. He watched the flames, seeing in them all the faces of the dead friends, foes, sons, strangers, all part of the same endless fire. When the songs faded, he rose, raising his cup to the heavens. "We were born from the sky and return to it. The wind will scatter our names, but the sky remembers." A hush fell over the camp. Even the stars seemed to bend closer. In the days that followed, Genghis withdrew from the noise of command. He spent his mornings riding alone, his nights beneath the constellations that had guided him through every war. He spoke with shamans, listened to the stories of the ancients, and sometimes sat by the river, tracing patterns in the dirt. He dreamed of his mother's voice, of the day his father's poisoned blood fell into the grass, of Jamukha's last breath, of Borte's eyes in the twilight. All threads of the same tapestry, woven by the sky, now nearing its end. One evening, a great storm gathered over the plain. Lightning split the horizon. Thunder rolled like the drums of his armies. The Khan stood upon a hill, arms outstretched, his cloak whipping in the wind. "You called me your son," he shouted to the heavens. "Then take me home." The wind howled, fierce, wild, alive, and in its roar, he heard a voice older than the world. "You have returned, my child. You were never apart from me." The rain fell, washing away dust, blood, and memory alike. When it ended, the storm left behind a silence so vast it seemed holy. In that silence, the great Khan lay still. His eyes were open, reflecting the stars. The sword at his side glimmered faintly, not as a weapon, but as a promise. The shamans later said that Tengri himself descended that night, and that the sky claimed back its most faithful son. They buried him in secret, somewhere in the heart of the steppe, where no man would ever find him, because legends, unlike men, do not need tombs, And so ended the journey of Temüjin, son of the wolf, lord of the eternal sky. He conquered the world, and in the end conquered himself. But when the wind sweeps across the Mongolian plain, and the grass bows as if in reverence, the people still whisper his name, Genghis Khan. Chapter She. The march to the west, the march to the west. When the eternal sky claimed its sun, the world did not grow silent. Instead, the wind rose again, stronger, sharper, carrying the echo of hooves across continents. Though Genghis Khan had vanished into legend, his will did not die. It lived in every rider who had once sworn to follow him to the edge of the world, from the steppes of Mongolia, from the shores of the Anan and Kurlan rivers, from every smoke-blackened camp and wind-swept valley. The armies of the eternal sky gathered once more. They did not ride for gold, nor vengeance, nor even conquest. They rode because the wind had not yet stopped, and in its howl, they still heard the voice of their Khan. At their head rode Gadai, the son of Genghis, flanked by the great generals, Subutai and Jeeves, heirs, men molded in their master's image, bound not by blood but by destiny. They set their gaze upon the horizon, where the world's edge shimmered in mist, the lands of the west, unknown, untamed, unbroken. The Khan spirit rides before us, Subutai said, and as long as the wind blows from the east, his empire will have no end. The march began like thunder, rolling over the earth, from the steppes into the frozen forests of Rus, from the snows of Siberia to the plains of Hungary. The Mongol tide swept westward, a living storm under banners of black and gold. Villages vanished as smoke, castles crumbled like sand before the sea. The monks of Europe whispered of a scourge born from the end of the earth, the riders of Genghis, ghosts with eyes like fire and hearts like iron. But to the Mongols themselves, this was not terror, it was faith. Every night they offered kumis to the sky, bowed before the north wind, and prayed not for victory, but for the Khan spirit to see what they had become. One winter, as the army crossed the Volga River, a blizzard swallowed them whole. The snow howled, erasing all direction, and even Subutai, the Iron Wolf, felt the breath of death upon his neck. That night, he dreamed. He saw a rider of light standing upon the frozen plain, clad in silver armor, his face shadowed by a wolf-skin helm. "My general," the rider said, "why do you still march?" Subutai fell to his knees. "Because the world is not yet under the sky's gaze." The figure smiled, a smile both human and divine. "The sky is infinite. It does not need the world. It only needs the heart that believes." When Subutai awoke, the storm had ended. The sky was clear, vast and blue, and in the distance, a hawk circled high, as if watching. He said nothing to his men, but from that day on, his march became slower, more measured, less like a conquest, more like a pilgrimage. The Mongols reached Kiev, then Poland, then the Carpathian Mountains. Europe trembled, kings prayed, armies gathered like frightened flocks. And then, suddenly, the riders stopped. At the edge of the Danube, Subutai looked westward, toward lands he could take, and beyond them, seas without end. He raised his hand, and the army halted. No horns sounded, no orders came, only silence and the sound of the wind. "The Khan's journey is complete," he said. "Let the sky rest." The generals bowed their heads. They knew the truth, that the spirit which had driven them across half the world was no longer calling them forward. That night, the Mongols made camp upon a vast plain. They lit no fires, they spoke no words. The wind carried strange music, low, ancient, like the hum of forgotten prayers. And when the moon rose, many claimed to see a vision, a rider, pale and bright, crossing the sky from east to west. His cloak was woven from stars, his eyes were two suns, and behind him trailed a river of light, a host of spirits riding with him into the endless night. The shamans whispered, "The Khan rides again. He goes where the sun sets to conquer the unseen." At dawn, the army began its long journey home. Some never made it back, others vanished into legend, their names blending with the wind. The lands they had crossed bore no monuments, no graves, no thrones, only the memory of thunder. But those who returned to Karakorum spoke of strange dreams, dreams of a vast western sea, and a voice saying, "No empire is eternal, save the one carried in the hearts of men." Years later, when the empire fractured, when new khans rose and fell, when even Karakorum turned to dust, the tale of that final march remained. They said that Genghis Khan's spirit still rode the western wind, his horse's hooves sparking stars across the sky, guiding lost souls toward the horizon. And on quiet nights, when the moon hung low over the steppe, old men would tell their sons, "Listen, that sound you hear in the wind, it is the march of the eternal sky, the echo of the Khan who never truly died." Chapter 12. The silence after the storm, the silence after the storm had passed. Across the vast steppes of Mongolia, the grass swayed in waves of green and gold, and the wind sang softly, not the scream of battle, but the song of peace that follows devastation. The fires of conquest were gone, the banners of war, once black with dust and glory, lay folded in quiet yurts. And though the empire of the great Khan stretched farther than any before it, it seemed strangely empty, as if the world itself had paused to breathe. In Karakorum, the capital of the eternal sky, life returned slowly. The forges cooled, the hooves of horses beat not for war, but for the rhythm of trade and travel. Children ran along the riverbanks, their laughter echoing where once only the drums of war had thundered. And yet, beneath the calm, there lingered a whisper, the memory of the storm that had once shaken heaven and earth. Old warriors sat outside their tents at dusk, their hair white, their eyes clouded by smoke and time. When the young ones asked of the Khan, they did not speak of blood, nor gold, nor fear. They spoke of the wind. When he rode, they said, the wind itself followed him. When he fell, the wind carried him away. And when the wind returns, we know the Khan rides again. Far beyond the borders of the known world, ruins still bore his name. Broken walls whispered of his passing. In the deserts of Persia, old travelers swore that at night they heard hooves echo across the sand, a phantom host riding toward the horizon. In China, the poets called him the wrath of heaven. In the West, the monks wrote of the scourge of God. But in the heart of the steppe, among his people, he was neither wrath nor scourge. He was the son of the sky, the man who reminded the world that destiny could wear the face of a mortal. One evening, a shaman of Karakorum climbed the sacred hill overlooking the valley. There, under the pale light of the moon, he lit incense and whispered to the winds, "O eternal blue sky, your son has returned to you, but his name remains upon the earth. Shall we remember him as conqueror, or as the man who dreamed of unity?" The wind answered not with words, but with motion. The grass bent, the stars trembled. And for a moment, the shaman saw him not as the Khan of war, but as Temüjin, the boy by the Anan River, watching the clouds drift across the endless heavens. Years passed. Empires rose upon the bones of his new Khans claimed his lineage. Old enemies rebuilt their walls, but none could escape his shadow. Even when his name became legend, his spirit remained a current beneath the river of history. For the sky does not forget. One winter night, when the moon was full and the air was clear as glass, a storm swept across the steppe. Swift, sudden, without thunder. The herders awoke to find their fires snuffed out, their horses restless, their hearts filled with awe. And as they looked up, they saw something moving within the clouds, a vast, ghostly host riding through the stars. At its head was a rider clad in shadow and light, his cloak trailing like a comet's tail, his eyes burning with the reflection of all he had seen, the birth and death of worlds. He did not speak. He did not need to. The people fell to their knees, and from their lips rose a single whisper, Genghis Khan. Then the storm passed. The wind fell still, and in that silence, the steppe seemed to remember every hoofbeat, every cry, every life that had once burned in the name of the eternal sky. The next morning, the world was calm. The rivers glimmered under frost. The mountains slept beneath snow. And for the first time in centuries, the steppe was utterly quiet, a silence so deep it seemed sacred. But if one listened closely, beneath that silence was a faint rhythm, the echo of a heartbeat, the sound of hooves in the farthest distance. It was not the beginning of war. It was the breath of memory. The bards of the future would tell his story, how a boy born of wolves became the master of the earth, how the sky itself bent to his will, how even death could not end his march. But the truth, whispered only among the wise, was simpler. The Khan never sought to conquer the world. He sought to unite it beneath one sky. And when the world was too small for his dream, he rode into eternity. And so ended the legend of Genghis Khan, the son of the eternal sky, whose storm had passed, but whose silence still shapes the wind. For as long as the wind moves over the grass, as long as men remember the taste of freedom, the Khan lives on, not in tune or tale, but in the breath of the earth itself. The sky is eternal, the earth is eternal, and so is the name of the Khan. Epilogue, the song of the eternal sky, the song of the eternal sky, long after the dust of war had settled, long after the bones of the empire had turned to earth. A lone bard stood upon the cliffs of the Anan River. In his hands was a Morin cur, its strings made from horsehair, its voice trembling with memory. He lifted his gaze to the endless blue above, and he sang, not of kings or gold, nor of conquest or cruelty, but of a man who dreamed beneath the same sky as all men. He was born from the river and the wind, sang the bard, a child of hunger and of hope. His cradle was the dust, his blanket was the storm. He had nothing, not a name that lasted, not a land to call his own. And yet, the sky looked upon him and whispered, rise. Temüjin rose. He rose against the cruelty of fate, against the tribes that hunted him, against the silence of the world that forgot his name. From his pain, he forged unity. From chaos, he shaped destiny. From men, he built an empire that reached from sunrise to sunset. But more than all the lands he conquered, more than the walls he shattered, he conquered the divisions of men. He gave them one banner, one breath, one sky. He was not just a conqueror, the bard sang. He was the wind that bound the mountains to the plains, the will that turned clans into nations. He was the storm that burned away weakness, the silence that followed strength. And as the strings quivered, the river below seemed to murmur the same refrain: eternal sky above, eternal sky below. Your son has returned home. Centuries passed, and the empire of the great Khan crumbled into the dust from which it rose. Stone gave way to sand, names faded from memory, and history, fickle and proud, moved on. But the song did not die. It lingered on the lips of shepherds, in the drums of shamans, in the rhythm of hooves across the plains. Each time a rider galloped across the horizon, each time the wind roared across the mountains, the world seemed to remember him, not as a tyrant, not as a god, but as the voice of the sky. There are tales that say his tomb lies hidden beneath a mountain, guarded by the winds themselves, that when the world grows weak and the tribes of man forget their brotherhood, the sky will open once more, and the Khan will rise again, not to destroy, but to remind. For the sky is one, the bard whispered, and beneath it we are all its children. As the sun sank behind the hills, the bard laid his instrument down upon the grass. The wind picked up, slow, reverent, endless. He closed his eyes and listened. He heard hooves, faint but steady. He heard the cry of eagles circling above. He heard the laughter of children in faraway villages, the whisper of rivers, the rustle of grass that had once drunk the blood of armies. And in that eternal chorus, he heard a single voice, deep and distant, the voice of the Khan himself. Do not remember me for the wars I waged, it said, for they were but the forge of a greater dream. Remember me for the unity I sought, for the day when man will live beneath one sky, without walls, without chains, for only then will my conquest be complete. The bard wept, not from sorrow, but from understanding, for he knew that the Khan's empire had not truly fallen. It had only changed shape. It lived in every man who dared to dream beyond his borders. It lived in every woman who raised her voice against the silence of fate. It lived in every people who looked to the sky and whispered, "We are one." Night descended upon the steppe. The stars burned bright and cold, like the eyes of the eternal sky itself. The bard's song faded into the wind, but the wind did not forget. It carried the melody over mountains and seas, across deserts and kingdoms, until it became not a song, but a truth written in the breath of the world. The sky is eternal, the wind is eternal, and so is the dream of the Khan, and so ends the wars of the eternal sky, not with the death of a man, but with the birth of a legend. For legends do not die, they only change their form from sword to story, from blood to wind, from man to myth. The song of the eternal sky still echoes, for every heart that dares to rise from the ashes of its past, for every soul that seeks freedom beneath the same heavens. And somewhere, in the silent corners of eternity, the great Khan rides still, his shadow long, his purpose endless, his spirit carried by the wind. Temüjin, Genghis Khan, son of the eternal sky.